Hi, this is Natalie Hoffman of FlyingFreeNow.com, and you're listening to the Flying Free Podcast, a support resource for women of faith looking for hope and healing from hidden emotional and spiritual abuse. Welcome to episode 74 of the Flying Free Podcast. Today I have with me a survivor, and she's going to share her story, and her name is Kathryn. So welcome to the podcast, Kathryn.
Thanks, Natalie.
Okay, so the first question is, how did you meet your husband, and did you notice any red flags before you got married to him?
Yeah, we actually met in college. I kind of laughed because I was being as rebellious as my rule-following self would be. And we were through fraternity sorority things, which I really wasn't supposed to be hanging out with the frat guys, according to my parents. I didn't party at all, but it was the heart of it. I was like, I'm going to be there. But that's where we met. I think at the time, looking back, he was a little immature, which I really didn't think was a big deal because we were all young. I guess looking back, it's like, notice somebody's immature. That's probably a bad sign. At that time, he didn't have a great work ethic, and he was newly converted, according to himself. That's what he told me. Mm-hmm. Looking back, there were probably more glaring red flags that I kind of skipped over. Like he was kind of pushy a little bit physically, more than I probably wanted to be or felt like was right. He was very dramatic, like very over the top dramatic. I guess I just hadn't been around a guy like that, so it was kind of intriguing. But looking back, I was like, that's probably a really good red flag. And I think definitely looking back, I thought what he presented as private was probably more deceptive about himself. If I asked questions and it was kind of this, I don't really want to talk about that, I took that as just being private instead of being like, well, I'm just not going to tell you about that part of myself. Which is funny, but he actually lived at home for a while. And so looking back on, we dated for several years, but I could never use his bathroom when we went to his house. Like, even if he knew I was coming, he never cleaned his bathroom. And looking back, I was like, that's like a thing. Like, you couldn't clean a space for me to go to the bathroom.
That is a thing.
So, I don't know. I mean, I guess in my mind, I was like, well, some people are just messy and, you're right. I like to call it glitter painted. And, at the moment, it wasn't a big deal. But looking back, I was like, that was a bad thing.
Kind of strange. Okay, so what were some of the ways then, after you got married, what were some of the ways that he emotionally or spiritually abused you throughout the course of your marriage?
Yeah, it was funny thinking about this. I was like, it's almost hard to narrow down. I could kind of give you an example from lots of places. I know spiritually, a lot of what was the most damaging was he would use verses to condemn me when I questioned him or disagreed. There was a lot. He's very intelligent, so he was very easy for him to pull out scriptures and be like, "Oh, you're doing this, or you're in this sin now," and switch the focus to how horrible I was.
Yeah.
He was really good at quoting back to me, like if I had ever confessed like a struggle or a flaw that I saw in myself. He was really good at parroting those back to me in the right moments of, oh, look at you. You said you had that problem. Now look, here you are doing it again. He was really good at that. I think also spiritually, he made going to church so enjoyable. I was converted from an early age and have always, Sunday is completely sacred to me. I have always loved going to church and being there, and my days kind of set apart in ways. And he just made it so enjoyable. Like looking back, he never helped get the kids ready, which was kind of okay. I'm like, okay, well, I could do that. But then he would intentionally wait to get ready, or he would wait till I said, okay, well, I'm going to go get in the shower. And then he'd be like, well, I'm going to go first, and then make us late. And it just, it was just really, I didn't realize it until we kind of separated. I was like, wow, he made sense. I don't even know if it was a conscious effort on his part, but it was just like the one day that I was like, I need us to be on time. And he just wouldn't do it. At one point I did say, let's take separate, like I would start leaving him and I started taking separate cars.
Yeah.
But of course, when we got to church, people were asking, why are y'all in separate cars? Which sent
Right.
him reeling of like, we can't do that. People are talking and, you're making us look bad. And
yeah. Well, my husband's in the shower still. Hey, if you don't want to take separate showers, cars, then take a shower sooner.
Exactly. But I ended up kind of just hating going to church. And I just had never actually felt that way my entire life. 30 something years. And it was the first time in the last couple of years that we were married that I was like, this feels awful to go to church.
Yeah.
But I think he knew my faith was a rock for me. And I don't know how conscious he was or intentionally he was trying to tear that down, but it was like the one place that I could go and find solace. And I feel like he went after that, even if it wasn't intentionally, it was just somewhere that he had to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's really, to me, that was kind of one of the hardest points, was because you kind of can't help it. You start to see I don't know if everybody does that, but I felt like I did looking back. I saw this abuser who saw nothing but my flaws and nothing but what I did wrong. And, almost like God kind of morphs into that, almost like the Israelites kind of saw God as a Pharaoh because they just couldn't get out of that mindset.
Right.
I felt kind of like, God was kind of that way too, of constantly being like, oh, geez, Kathryn, look, you screwed up again. Like, here you are, same sin, same, character flaw or whatever. And I think that was, spiritually, that was probably the most damaging thing, was just to start. I don't know why my brain did that, but it just morphed God into this constantly disappointed, constantly angry kind of presence, or completely far away. It's like if my husband could get mad at me and not talk to me for 3 days, then maybe God felt that way too.
Yep. I think that was so common for women. I definitely can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, I know for me, I was constantly like begging, like, give me the grace, make me better. Help me to be pleasing to my husband, help me to be a light to my family, to be something that brings life. Because you kind of feel like the way he made me feel was I was the poison in our family.
Yeah.
And then I was poisoning everything instead of breathing life into it. And it's just hard because you're begging and crying out for years and years, and there's just nothing. And you're like, well, maybe God has turned his face from me. And, even went as far as to think of like, well, maybe I'm not a Christian. Like, maybe God didn't love me.
Yes.
all these years.
I did. I thought the same thing. I remember thinking, literally, I thought these words, maybe I'm just a Christian wannabe. Because we went to Piper's church, and he taught that, it was the Calvinist theology, and they teach that, if God chooses you, if you're one of the elect, then you're a Christian, then you will become a Christian. And if you're not, then it doesn't matter even if you want to, you just won't be. And I was terrified at that point, thinking, maybe I'm just a Christian wannabe and God hasn't chosen me. It was one of the darkest points of my life, I think. So yeah, it's really sad. So sad. So what did you do? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like I talked about spiritual. It was really funny. I was sitting thinking about, like, the one glaring example I have for, like, emotional abuse, just if someone's having hard kind of tangibly grasping that, was early on when we were married. He actually, he loved the phrase, I can't believe this is who I'm married, which is very cutting to me. But one instant was, he actually quit wearing his wedding ring for a while. And I'm sure I didn't communicate this the best. But, like, I went to him and I was like, I get it. Some couples don't wear wedding rings. Maybe I'm just insecure. You try to go in there with that, like, meek personality. Like, it really hurts my feelings that you're choosing not to wear your wedding ring. And his first instinct was to just furious. Like, he was just so furious I brought it up. And then all of a sudden the conversation turned to him crying and him being like, I can't believe you're accusing me of doing something. I never even look at other women. And, it was that. And then it was just how horrible I was, that I was making assumptions about him. And I can't believe, there was that phrase, I can't believe who I married. And looking back, I was like, okay, so the inventory of this conversation was, he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. And I told him, hey, that hurts my feelings. And his first reaction was to be confrontational. And then he blamed me for it. And then he made accusations about how I felt being hurt by him not wearing his wedding ring.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left that conversation feeling guilty for having accused him of something and feeling ashamed for being quote unquote insecure because he was choosing. I was like, that's it. Like that sums up any big issue we had. That's how it went.
I'm so glad you shared that and spelled that out, because I know there's women out there listening going, that is exactly what I experience on a regular basis. And two, the other thing, the comment, look who I'm married, or I can't believe I'm married to you, is such what that's basically saying is, I can't believe I was so stupid to marry someone like you. Like, what was I ever thinking that I would ever marry someone as what, fill in the blank, as you are? It implies so much degradation and shame placed on the other person. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so what coping strategies did you use? How did you get through how many years were you in that?
So we were married before it was final. We actually crossed over our 11th year, but we were separated by that point. So it was like 10 and a half full years. And it was definitely a progressive thing, but we accomplished a lot in 10 years. We have 3 kids. I had 3 miscarriages. Both of his parents died before we were 30. It was a lot. So, but it was for him, I definitely felt like it was it progressively got worse and worse. Like looking back, I'm like, okay, he started gaslighting me like when we were dating really bad on our honeymoon. And then it just snowballed from there. But, so coping strategies. Oh gosh, I'm sure if there's a master list, I could probably check off all of them, Natalie. I really think I probably could. I mean, anything from, I guess if you want to say it's more minor, definitely turned to food. That was a thing. And he only liked really bad junk food, and, to not deal with his rage, that's what we ate because it was just easier to not fight about the food, which did not help 5'3" me stay healthy. I became depressed. I spent time throwing myself into, all those supposedly wonderful marriage help Christians do better books. And what I've decided is over the years, I was really just grasping for hope. Like I just needed hope that it would get better, that he would find love for me, or, find something favorable about me to at least bring out kindness. And really what I was doing was I was treating hope like it was grace, that like if I hoped enough, if I worked enough, that God would give him the grace to be different. And that's really where that kind of fell down. But I mean, I guess some of the lower points, that depression really took over. I hadn't struggled with it when I was younger, but I actually at one point started cutting. And it was crazy. I mean, it's so funny how long you'll stay in even after you realize you've gone off the deep end. Because I can remember thinking, because it was always the same, he'd always had the same complaints just over and over and over again. It was always this huge deal, even if it was like a minor thing that I forgot to do, or, dinner wasn't ready when you walked in the door or whatever. But I can remember having this thought process of like, maybe if I can put scars on my skin, I can remember what upsets him.
Yes.
So it was like, and with them, it's always constantly changing too. So it's not like you could ever actually accomplish that. But, and there was kind of a point in there where I realized he really didn't love me, because I started to get scared that I was cutting. And I don't know why. I guess you think that if they can see you harming yourself like that they'll snap out of whatever it is they're doing. And so stupid of me told him at one point, like, hey, I'm scared. I've started doing this. I don't want to do that. Can you please, if you have issues with me, just address them with more kindness. Like, you don't have to like not tell me I'm doing something wrong. Just be gentle or kind about it or whatever. Don't yell something. And he ended up yelling at me. He ended up telling me that I was being melodramatic and I just needed attention. And then maybe a week later, it became this like pretty little bookend to his fights with me of, well, I wish you would just slit your wrist and then I wouldn't have to be married to you. So, yeah. That's where we were.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that
well,
you had to go through that.
yeah, and it's just,
yeah. Go ahead.
and I mean, I guess at its lowest point, I truly became suicidal, which is crazy. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, I hit all these like really low spots, and then it's like, okay, like God was always there in that midst, which is amazing. But it was like, I was truly suicidal at one point, and he yelled at me, and I don't know why. You get in these like upswings with them, and you think, oh, we're making progress, so I'm going to tell you this really dark time because it's going to help you understand where I was. And he yelled at me about that, and I could have saved him from being married to me if I had just gone through with my plan. And he wasn't a very nice person.
No, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
So when did you, did you ever think about the word abuse? When did you finally realize, I think this is abusive and this is not something that I can do anymore?
Yeah, it was kind of a long process, and probably what I consider to be my rock bottom. I actually, I was completely isolated from my family. He did a good job of that. Definitely felt away from God, but I was working at that point, and I say it's an affair. It was emotional. There wasn't really any physical to it, but I really had feelings for this other man, and that's kind of where my rock bottom was. And so I have this really bittersweet relationship with that sin because it was wholly wrong. But I remember it so clear. It was so vivid. It was this moment of he told a joke, and I laughed really hard, and then I just shut down and started profusely apologizing for laughing. And he looked at me and he said, I just told a joke to make you laugh, and then you laughed, and now you can't look me in the eyes. I don't really understand what happened. And it was just this like light bulb moment of like, I'm not allowed to laugh at home. Like I'm not allowed. And then it was like, I'm not allowed to laugh. Like, what is that? And so that was, it was wrong, but it was also like the light bulb that kind of went off. And in my desperate grasp for hope for something, because you really get that your husband doesn't love you, given our history, and you really feel like God doesn't love you. It's kind of like, well, this person is at least nice to me and likes being around me.
Right.
So I grabbed an idol and thought that would help. And as God and his mercy does, he exposes all of our things. And it really went on for about 3 months. And then my ex-husband found out about it, which exploded everything, and caused a lot of cognitive dissonance, because I have this guy who doesn't want me. I'm married to this person who doesn't want me, who consistently talks about he wished I'd killed myself. And all of a sudden there's a switch of, I love you. I can't believe you betrayed me. It was really a moment of like, oh my gosh, I was crazy. Like, cause I had that moment of like, I was crazy. Like all this was in my head. It wasn't that bad. Look how much he loved you, how heartbroken he is. It was weird. But I found Flying Free, and I read Leslie Vernick's book. And that was probably where it really started to click of like, this is abusive. Like, this is, I'm not crazy. I didn't make all this up. It's not in my head. These are real issues and real problems, and things that absolutely have to change. That's kind of where I was. One of the biggest things I think for me was I had been with y'all. I hadn't joined Flying Free, but had been with the group and reading your stuff, and started reading through the books about emotional abuse. And I decided that I was homeschooling 3 kids. My ex was in the house all the time because he wasn't working. And I was like, I just need space. And I have a mentor, and she has this farm out in the middle of nowhere, and she's like, I was like, I just need time away from it. And she's like, go to my farm, like just go out there, do what you need to do. So I actually took a weekend of solitude. Nobody else was out there. I prayed and I fasted, and it was kind of one of those, felt like Jacob. I was like, this is it, God. I am not letting go until you bless me, until you fix this marriage. And I think it was so beautiful the first night there, it was like, I was like ready, and it was, I laughed because I don't usually pray out loud, but I found myself, I was actually almost like screaming inside of this cabin by myself, talking to God. And it was just, it ended up being this really beautiful, I mean, it was just so clear in my mind. It was like, I had my hands in God's robes. And I was like, you're going to fix this. It's not going to fall apart. And it was this moment of, it was like, it hit me. He hit me so hard with it. There I am, got my hands in his robes. And it's like when your toddler starts throwing a fit and you're holding him in your arms and you're smiling because you're like, I love you anyway. You just pitch your fit.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like. That he wasn't warring with me. He was holding me. And he had been holding me the whole time. And that was kind of the moment that I was like, okay, like, I don't know where you're going with this. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but God has me and I can trust that. It was beautiful. It ended up being a great weekend. It kind of restored that relationship that I thought had been lost with the Lord. So that was really good. That was kind of my long, that was like a whole year-long process of really coming to terms with, this is not a good relationship. This is an abusive relationship. I'm probably going to have to get out of this relationship, was kind of how that went.
So then what happened after that then? And did you, I mean, obviously you filed for divorce. And then how did things go after that?
So I did that weekend away, and it was kind of funny because I think God she just blesses, like he must laugh at me because I was like, okay, like I'm going to set these really strong boundaries with him. And if he's still not shaping up by, this date, then I'll ask him to at least move out. And so that, he blew through every boundary that I set, and that date came and went, and then something really terrible happened. And then I was like, okay, like I get it. Are you sure, God? Like, are you really sure that this isn't going to just magically turn around? And set some more boundaries. And then that date kind of came and went, and he really, really did some stuff. And then we separated, and then I filed for divorce. But that's kind of, I feel like God was just like kind of laughing along, being like, I'm very clearly closing these doors for you, Kathryn.
How bad does it have to get, right?
Yeah, and it was really funny. It was like every time I set a deadline, I was like, "Oh, but he could change," because I mean that's all you hear, right? Hold on to your little ounces of hope,
right?
That he's going to change. And every time I let it go, it was like something worse happened, and I was like, "Okay, I'm done."
So, is your divorce final?
It is final. It was final in January.
Okay, and how have things gotten better since you got out of that relationship?
Oh goodness. I think God was really good. He gave me something very tangible with someone who has to kind of go back to places and be like, you're doing the right thing. I think he just knows me well enough and knows that I need that. Something that was extremely tangible for me was the day I filed for divorce and I told him in a safe setting, but I told him, and I got back to the car and I was crying so hard, and all of a sudden I took this deep breath, and it was just this huge, it was like I didn't even realize I had been carrying this jagged rock in my chest that made every breath painful. And I mean, still 6 months later, I still, like, every so often just take this deep breath of like, I physically do not feel that rock anymore.
That's amazing.
And it was just, it has been a huge blessing to just, you get caught up in the doing mediation and doing all that kind of stuff. And it's just, that was huge. I have already started to see a difference in my kids. I have a 10-year-old who's the oldest, and it's like seeing him come back to the little kid that he was. He's smiling, he's laughing, he's doing more things and interacting with people. And I feel like with that, I feel like your kids hold you tight, you don't want to mess them up, but I really feel like they're getting better. Like they're still angry. They're angry at me. They're used to me fixing everything, but I'm still seeing these glimpses of like, oh, that's who you were before all of this craziness set into your little personality.
Yep. And as you heal and get stronger, that's going to just totally rub off on them, and you're all just going to be able to exhale, really. It's just going to get better and better. It's so ironic, actually, that so many women that's one of their biggest fears, is that, especially if they have little kids, is that their little kids are going to, go to hell in a handbasket and turn out bad. And the statistics just do not show that anymore. And Gretchen Baskerville, author of Life-Saving Divorce, goes into all of that in her book. But I don't see that either. I don't see that in the lives of my younger kids. My younger kids are so much happier and so much freer. They don't spend all their time with me. They go back and forth. But they get that break because there is such a kind of an oppressive feeling when you're around someone who's negative and who's constantly criticizing you and constantly saying no. It's oppressive, and they feel it. And when they're at my home, we don't have that. There's no feeling like that. It's free. They can be who they want to. They can have a meltdown, and nobody's going to criticize them or, make them feel like they're a subhuman because they're children and they act like children.
Yeah.
So I hope that encourages somebody out there listening who's, I'm not encouraging everyone to get a divorce. I encourage people to make their own choice about that. But if you do need to get out of a relationship, and the one thing that's holding you back is your kids, it's do some more research, and because you might find out that the reality of it. And here's the thing too, if you want to put a spiritual spin on it. The enemy, everything is always the opposite of what's true with the enemy. And so he's going to tell you lies that are the exact opposite of what actually is on the other side. He's going to make you think that if you cross that river, that you're going to get to the other side and it's going to be even worse than it is now. And the opposite is true.
Yeah. And something I actually told myself a lot was that I cannot make a decision or make a mistake that will ultimately change God's plans for my children. I'm just not that powerful. Like
Right.
God works through all of that. And that was something I just really clung to, of like, maybe I don't know what's best, or I'm going to make mistakes trying to help them heal and move forward. But ultimately, God loves my children, and I can't change His plans for them.
Right.
Not with anything that I do.
Right. Okay. So what if you could go back and talk to your younger self? What is one thing that you learned through this whole process that you would let her know?
I think one of just the biggest things is truly getting down to the nitty-gritty of who you are in Christ, and that you are this just beloved child all the time because of Christ. And it's, that moment you lose the truth about who you are, you become an easy target for sin. In my marriage, losing that identity also helped my husband continue in what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of that, like, I don't claim like respect because of who I am or some merit, but because of who God is and who He made me to be.
Right.
The God of the universe, creator of all, the mighty one, the just judge of all the earth, the Alpha and the Omega, the all-knowing, the all-seeing, holy, holy, holy God says, I have intrinsic, undeniable, priceless worth, and I'm due kindness and respect because of that. And on that alone, I think I wish I had that confidence and strength years ago.
That's beautiful. It really is the key to healing, is finally coming into your true identity of who you are and learning how to embrace that person that God created you to be. Because your spouse is not embracing that person. Your spouse is actually, he's putting graffiti all over your personhood. And it's graffiti that says horrible, horrible things about you. And he's just defacing the creation of God. And that is just not God's plan for His daughters at all. That's not God's plan for any of His daughters or His sons. So anyway, so one last question. What piece of advice would you give to someone who's listening right now and wondering if they should leave?
I think there's so many things that I felt like I learned. I think for me, it was that being patient. It does still take a lot of waiting, even when you're trying to make that decision. If you can be physically safe and take it step by step and kind of have those conversations with the Lord of like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. If you're gonna change, not an ultimatum, but just that, like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Make it clear, make me see. Mm-hmm. Is he changing? Is he playing a game? And that takes time. Like, I walked away feeling completely at peace with every step that I took, and I still feel that. Yeah. And I feel like it's because I took that time and was patient, even though I think deep down I knew that it wasn't going to work. But for me, that was the key of not having any kind of regret or questioning. I don't ever look back over my shoulder and think, what if I didn't wait long enough? Or what if I didn't do this? Or what if he just needed more time? I never felt that way. And I think for me, it was because I took that time, started working on myself, seeing if I could stay, putting it through the lens of like, can I stay with this person and exercise my gifts freely? Can I be who I want to be as reflective of God and not get in trouble when I come home? Mm-hmm. Are there going to be negative consequences for me being who God made me to be with this person? And unfortunately for me, I couldn't be who God created me to be with that spouse.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great advice. I had a counselor told me, she said, make that decision when you know for sure, and not before. And I thought it was good advice, and it did make me wait a lot longer too. I waited a lot longer. I mean, looking back, I wish I would have left sooner, but like you, I also don't have any regrets. I know that I did not leave one single stone unturned. In fact, I turned over every stone multiple times just to make sure, there wasn't something salvageable under there. And there was nothing. And that's when I finally filed. And then once I filed, it was like you were talking about this sharp weight, it was like a huge weight lifted. And I really did also feel free. I just felt like I felt the pleasure of God on me. Like I was finally walking in alignment with God's will for my life. It was a beautiful thing. And then nobody could change my mind. Nobody. I mean, people could slander me, malign what I did, say that God was against me. And I was just like so confident. How can they know? They can't possibly know what God is telling you to do,
And my dad's a pastor. So my family was a huge, they were you stay together no matter what. And God's been really good, because it was, I had to face that of like, okay, like they're going to disown me, but I couldn't let it go. It was like I knew where God was calling me, and I had to go. And I was like, okay, well, if it's everything, but I still get Jesus. But that was good. My parents didn't talk to me for about 24 hours. And then my dad called me and said, he calls me Sugar. He goes, Sugar, I don't know what to tell you other than that God's moving in my heart. And he goes, I've completely changed my mind. We need to talk. I love you. I support you. I mean, it was great. It's probably the closest my parents and I have ever been, actually.
That is absolutely incredible.
So it can feel like you're going to lose everything. I mean, I'm a worst case scenario person, so I prepared to lose everything. And I felt like God has really blessed it and not put me through that. But getting my family back was huge, because my ex actually intentionally created drama. And I didn't figure this out after we separated. And like he was creating fights between my family and I so that we wouldn't communicate. That's been a big blessing.
That's wonderful. Kathryn, thank you so much for taking some time to come on here and answer our questions. And we probed quite a bit. And I just think that your testimony is going to be a huge encouragement to a lot of people. So thank you.
Yes, well, thank you for your work and being open and vulnerable with all of us, because it takes all of us to be that way to make change.
That's right. We're in this together. All right. And the rest of you who are listening, until next time, fly free.